Here we are. Good to catch up. I know you just said you're knackered from all the surfing. Is that right?
Yeah. I just had some waves yesterday. They weren't that big, but I bought a new surfboard, like a hardboard. My first time on this 7.2 hardboard. So I was
I have no
trying
idea
it.
what that means, but it
I
sounds
know it
sounds
doesn't mean
difficult.
anything to you, but it's hard. It's really difficult. And I caught my
Uh-huh.
first wave, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Cool. Are you still on your feminine cleanse now? I forget what you're saying.
I have one more week. So
Gotcha.
eight days, and then
Okay.
celebration. Big
Cool.
part.
Are you gonna celebrate with women or what? How's that work?
So people ask me this question, like, how are you gonna integrate? And I've told some friends here about this, and they're like, are you gonna go prowling on the street? Are you gonna start going on Tinder? And I said, I think it's pretty much gonna be the same thing. I'm not gonna go actively chase. I mean, I still interact with women, and I have been interacting with women since the cleanse, but it will probably be the same thing, but it will be less of a push.
Hmm.
Because I think a lot of men, including myself, we were like actively chasing women, like approach, try and get the number, try and get something, instead of just being and letting yourself be open to it. Like just
Hmm.
see what comes in and trust life will give you what you need to get. Not.
Okay. All right. So let's just go into this because this is what we wanted to speak about. I spoke, I think, a couple weeks ago. You mentioned this feminine cleanse. I actually did see John Wineland's video about it, about this. I don't know if he called it feminine cleanse back in the video. But I thought it was
Yeah.
an interesting idea. Um, I've been talking on the podcast about trying out celibacy, and I think I am going to do this for a few months anyway. So I'm curious about this. So, like, what is the feminine cleanse? How'd you get into it? What's the story here?
Yeah, sure. So feminine cleanse, I'm going to get a bit theoretical. It's a way of breaking or releasing your attachment to the small feminine, which is women, because we as men right now become very over dependent on the feminine for approval, validation, um, feeling loved, feeling safe. And in my case, I really need women to feel safe. For me, it was they were safety for me,
Hmm.
like my mother. So the feminine cleanse is actually healing that attachment, becoming really whole and integrated in yourself, and then being more of a loving presence to women rather than being this little boy who needs mommy's attention, that type of thing. So
Hmm.
it's about growing into a mature man. And yeah, it's a lot about going into your shadows. A lot of dark stuff comes up. A lot of
Hmm.
rage comes up.
But
That
in practice, it's more than just celibacy. It's like not even flirting, right? Like as flirting gives you like a validation hit, and you can like kind of leech off of women. Like that's the idea, right?
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, look, I'm gonna say this. John Wineland and me are very different. John Wineland says, don't like you look at the woman, you get your coffee, don't do anything, you quickly go. So I don't believe in that. I think that's suppressing any type of impulse. So you can let the impulse come up, but you just become an observer to it. So you observe, oh, I did get a dopamine hit from that. Oh, I did start flashing my eyebrows. Oh, I did do that. You make a note of it, or you make a note in your mind, and then you notice it, and you notice the high of the dopamine hit, and then the low when you don't get the dopamine hit, and you notice how that levels up. So for me right now, it's interesting because about 2, 3 weeks ago, I was talking to two girls. I was out surfing, and there were two really cute girls, and we just had a conversation. And I was very open, but I remember we just talked, and they were flirting with me. But then it's interesting. I started talking to my surf instructor, so I literally just left and started talking to him. Like I was like, I enjoyed that, but I'm gonna go now talk to him. So I wasn't forcing myself to stay in that, and I noticed the energy coming up and I welcomed it, and then I let it go and I went to whatever I need to do next. So in a way, it's a much more healthy way to manage the energy rather than saying, oh, I'm flirting, suppress it, because that will create an unhealthy pattern. And I think a lot of red pill guys do this stuff. They say, oh, women's the enemy, avoid them. And that creates an unhealthy relationship to the feminine. So what I'm saying is you can allow it to come up. You can even enjoy it. You can notice the dopamine hit and then try and take control of that and move back to where you need to go, what you need to do. And the dopamine hit will get less and less. You'll get less of a need for that validation and approval. Not saying that it goes away. I mean, I still have it, but it's much less than it used to be. I mean, you could do it for 1 year if you want. It's a long time, but I think at 6 months or 90 days, it can have a huge impact.
And what have you noticed in yourself?
So for me, a big one was shame. A lot of shame was released. I remember, I think it was after week 3 or 4, the first stages was rage came up. And then after the rage subsided, a lot of shame came up. And I really got to know what shame really felt like. Because there's a lot of people talking about what it is, but I literally felt it in my body. So for me, it felt like sludge. It felt like slime in my body, in my skin, under my skin, in my genital area. A lot of a thickness of it, and I released a ton of it. And for me, I used to think, oh, I'm an introvert, because I used to feel very uncomfortable being around a lot of people a lot of times, and I was like, oh, it's just how I am. I'm an introvert. But what I noticed after doing this, I felt comfortable being in the presence of people. I even felt what they felt. You know, because I'm empathic, but I thought, oh, no, but I'm good. I can stand here and I can be in my own skin and feel good. I didn't feel this, like, I don't know if you know what I mean, but you can feel sometimes contracted where you don't really completely feel comfortable in a group of people. So for me, that was the shame. That was the energy that locks you in, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I feel that way actually still. I mean, and one thing that made me interested about this was noticing, okay, aside from sex, like obviously sex is obvious, but like making women laugh makes me feel good about myself. Or making, a flirtation, even if I have no interest in sleeping, or I'm flirting over text message with someone in a different country, it's like a way that I bolster my self-esteem in some way. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, it would be nice to be free of that. And then, but then I think about like social situations. I've been having a lot of dreams about this lately. I haven't had sex in 2 months, so I think my subconscious is kind of reeling. But I've been having dreams where I'm recognizing that I've like sought out women largely to get respect from people, because I'm not a gregarious guy. But when a group of people know that the hot girl's with me, they respect me. And I was like, oh, okay, now I'm cool. And so like all of this stuff, I'm like recognizing myself. I haven't actually done this yet beyond just not having sex for 2 months, but like, okay, this is something very intriguing here about being self-sustaining, or Robert Glover says like self-soothing, as opposed to needing women to laugh at my jokes to like feel good.
Yeah, that's totally right. Yeah, because that's sort of, the dopamine hit. Yeah, when you make a woman laugh, or when she flirts with you, or she gives you attention, you feel that, oh yeah, I'm the man. Yeah. You feel that strength. But yeah, what the feminine cleanse does is like, no, you already have that in you. You can be yourself. You can even be a dickhead if you not. I'm not saying you should be a dickhead, but if you're pissed off one day and you just want to say shut up, you can say it, because that's just honest. And nothing wrong with being angry and saying to a woman shut up, because sometimes you're just pissed off. You could say, you're really pissing me off. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at this stuff right now. I mean, I still have nice guy stuff going on. I still have approval seeking going on. But compared to before, I can enjoy myself for myself. I don't need to make the woman laugh. If she doesn't laugh or she's not interested, I'm like, okay, cool. But I go do my own thing. So it's all about being your own person, being free from that need. And then it's liberating, because you also become very clear on what you like and what you don't like. So like, this is another thing, because it's interesting you mentioned making women laugh. I wanted to do certain things like play guitar. And then I asked myself, well, why do I want to play guitar? And I was like, oh, to woo women. Because yeah, you're a guitar player, so you seem impressive. But I said, do I really want to play guitar? I don't give a shit about guitar, man. Like, I like surfing. That came out of the cleanse, because I had a dream since I was a child to do that, but I was too scared to do it. I didn't, I had so many limiting beliefs about that. And through the cleanse, I moved to a town right on the edge of Portugal, and I just started doing it because I said, all right, this is what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the true authentic nature was coming out, because I suddenly took away one chunk that I was wasting a lot of energy on, women. I mean, I would probably say 80% of my thoughts were on women. 80% of my thoughts were
Yeah.
on women.
Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, it just seems like an attempt at purity or authenticity because so many people. I mean, this probably goes beyond women, but like this need for validation. But yeah, I mean, guys who have like mother complexes or hooked on feminine or dependent on women. Of course, their behavior is modified to make sure they're still getting approval from mommy or small feminine or however you put it. One thing that I was curious about is, the way that I've only heard you and John Weiland speak about it, is that this seems to be a thing that works for guys who get laid.
The feminine cleanse.
Yeah, because like a lot. I mean, for a guy who's not getting laid, I can see like it's one thing if you eat too many donuts and you need to stop eating donuts, but if you are starving, you have no access to donuts. The idea of saying stop eating donuts, like you know what I mean?
Good question. It's a really good question. I mean, I'm going to say openly, yeah, I have been with a lot of women. So for a guy that hasn't been with a lot of women, would it work? Now, this is the problem. If you're doing it to get laid, that's the problem.
Right.
Because it's not about getting laid. What it is to say to yourself, I value who I am and I'm doing it for a higher purpose than myself. I'm doing it because I'm doing it for myself. It's putting yourself, it's a way of saying I put myself first. Because of what a lot of men do is they actually put women first, or they put other people before themselves. So for a guy who hasn't had a lot of experience with women, I actually say it would be better. It's actually better because in a way, they haven't built this addiction up. Because when you sleep with one woman, yeah, like you said, let's use the donut example. You have one donut, then you have another donut. That addiction builds up because you've got the taste of donuts. You're like, I want more donuts. And the more donuts you eat, you're going to have an addiction because you're building up neural pathways. You're building up more beliefs about wanting to eat donuts. So if you've slept with a lot of women and you're compulsively going through that pattern, going on dates, going on Tinder, going on having sex, you're just going to want more and more of it. It's going to spin, the wheel will spin faster.
I mean, I can buy what you're saying, and I think I agree. I think for someone who, especially someone who hasn't been with a woman in a long time, or maybe never, there could be a lot of freedom because like typically almost every guy who's not getting laid, it takes up a lot of his brain space, right? Like he's swiping on Tinder, he's getting frustrated, he's feeling shameful, he's not getting matches, or whatever the situation is. I just think it's a very hard idea to get a guy to accept who's not getting laid or who hasn't had experiences. I think it's a for a guy who hasn't been with a woman in a year to tell him he should spend a year not trying to get laid. I think it's very hard. Like the starving person, like don't worry about money for a while. I mean,
Yeah, it is
yeah.
difficult. I mean, there was a guy when I was in Robert Glover's, one of his groups, there was a guy who, he was married, but he hadn't been with a lot of women. He was very sexually experienced. And he was saying, maybe I should go out there and experience more sex. And he actually ended up doing the feminine cleanse. And I'm surprised he did it because I thought, oh, he probably needs to get more experience. Maybe he needs to, because him and his wife were talking about open relationships. But he did the feminine cleanse. I think maybe because I did it, I sort of gave him hope in that area. He did it for 3 months. It changed his life with his wife, his whole fucking career. He ended up getting a promotion. He ended up now I think he's gonna quit. He's gonna do his own business because he did the cleanse. It broke him free.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's easy. Look, I've been with a lot of women. It was fucking hard for me. When my therapist recommended this, it was actually my therapist that gave me the idea. I was terrified. I was like, what, how the hell am I going to do this? I spent 20 years of my life going for women. It was a big chunk of me. And now to say, look, you can't be, it's like it's killing your identity in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for guys who are, yeah, for these guys, maybe try a month and see how you feel and see the 1%
Yeah.
improvement, see what happens for 1%. But I think you should
Yeah.
do, I don't think it's as simple as saying, hey, just stop doing this. You've got to cultivate positive patterns and positive behaviors. Like, I know you do Qigong and Tao and all this stuff. It's good to cultivate new practices, which will take the place of the old patterns, and that will make you feel stronger and much more confident in yourself. And you might start realizing, I don't need women as much as I thought,
Mhm.
sort of thing.
Yeah, and actually maybe just for like a softer framing of this. I mean, even when I'm coaching guys who haven't been with women in a while, our first month is always focused specifically not on women, kind of for the same reasons, because whatever their needy behaviors have been obviously haven't worked anyway. And yeah, you have to find yourself first and your center first. But one thing that was interesting for me is that as I started thinking about like these little hits, right? I think John Wineland shared that video, like getting the barista to smile back, these little hits. I was noticing, I still do the polite smile, not in a sexual situation, but like the polite smile with strangers, especially strangers that I want to like me. Like here in Thailand, I want Thai people to like me so they know I'm not an obnoxious American. And I do like the fake smile a lot. And even that is a behavior that is inauthentic of me that I want to drop. And I'm like, well, this is like another little hit. It's not exactly feminine cleanse, but these are still ways I'm not being myself. And it would be nice to have a validation cleanse almost, I think.
Yeah, I think that's another, you could do a cleanse on the validation. Like, I think the feminine cleanse actually does cover it all, even if you're trying to get validation from men. And I have that with teachers or authority figures. I want to get validation approval from teachers. And at the same time, I fucking hate their guts because
Yeah,
like,
yeah, you shared that.
because I have a polarity with that, but related to my father.
Mm-hmm.
So you could extend the cleanse, I mean, to other areas and other things. I mean, in my cleanse for 1 month, I didn't have coffee and I didn't have any sugar. I cut it out completely.
Hmm.
And then one other month, I cut out Facebook. So I think for a month, yeah, a month and a half, I shut off my Facebook and Instagram. That was huge because I remember I was getting so much of a hit for validation on Facebook.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
That
look
seems
at
like
me.
an obvious thing to, yeah. Like, I mean, I just think for anybody, getting rid of your social media is such a good thing for your life. And actually, so for a long time, I've been thinking about this idea of digital minimalism. I've cut down a lot. Periodically, I'll go on Instagram and post a lot. Then, of course, I'm getting likes. So I'm checking the likes. And then, of course, I'm getting messages. And like, I realized only recently, or I admitted to myself only recently, how much of my Instagram exists to meet women. Because
Mm,
I mean, now that I'm being celibate, I'm like, I really have no interest in Instagram. Like, it's like I kid myself a little bit before that was partly for my business, which is a little bit true. But it's like, man, I really just like if I'm not doing that, like, man, um, it's just leeching. It's just dopamine.
yeah. Well, it's like fantasy, really. Facebook and social media, it's just fantasy. I mean, even women in general, we create this idea or fantasy of the sex we want, of the woman we want, and none of it exists. And that's where the masturbation comes in and porn culture. And I think what the cleanse does is actually makes that very clear that it's all a fantasy and it grounds you much more in reality. And it really just says, well, life is actually quite simple.
Hmm.
And it's
Have you ever
not, you don't.
seen? Good.
Go
Have you ever seen the video of Louis C.K., the comedian, talking about sadness?
no, 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 I'm seeing it.
Okay, maybe I'll add it in the show notes to the podcast. It's one of my favorite clips, like a 5 minute clip. We're basically talking about like phones have taken away our ability to be a person, which is just like sitting and letting emotions hit you, which is what would happen to people periodically before we had these smartphones stealing our attention.
Yeah, well, exactly. We're living in a little isolated bubble. And it's funny you mentioned that Louis C.K. I saw this BBC article where she was talking about dating as an addiction, and the guy was swiping on Tinder and Bumble and all this stuff. And she said, "Can you stop using it?" And he goes, "Oh no, I can't stop using it. It's like I need it." And he actually stopped using it for a month. And I think he said, oh yeah, my health improved, I'm meeting more friends, everything changed by just stopping this behavior.
Wait, that was about Louis C.K.? Wait.
No. That was the BBC article, but it was very similar, like this type of culture of being on phones and
right,
being completely disconnected.
I'm curious though. I want to go back to the porn stuff, because like, what did you do with your lust? Like, because there's the dopamine seeking, validation seeking. Like, we could kind of like, I think that's easier to identify. Maybe not. I don't know. But then like, there's also just your raw, like your body's desire. What did you do about that, or how did you?
Good question.
Process
This is a good
that?
question. So I've been doing. I studied with Mantak Chia because I know you did as well in Tao Gardens early in Jan, and he has a lot of techniques about moving sexual energy up. It's interesting. When I processed all the shame in my stomach area and my genital area, what seemed to happen is that energy in the sex area started moving up my body in the front. So I didn't need to do any techniques and specifically to move it up. I just had to remove a lot of the shame and anything blocking it lower in my.
And how did you remove that shame sludge stuff?
Somatic therapy, spending a lot of time meditating on it, feeling into it, dropping into it, and exploring it. And I'll reveal this here, obviously, because this is the first time I've talked about it. Actually, one of the things that came up in my cleanse, I think it was even 3 weeks into it, was I found out that I was sexually abused as a child at a very young age. And a lot of my dysfunction was coming from that. And I'd done a lot of somatic work before, higher up in my body, but I never got so low in my body. And I knew why, because it was a lot of that trauma was stuck in my lower region. So in a way, I was cut off at the hips. And my therapist called it a hip pelvic split. So you can feel the upper part of your body, but you don't feel the lower part of your body. And that, because I stopped this compulsive habit of chasing women, I actually got time to actually face the trauma and to process that. And a lot of that was blocking my sexual energy to come up. So I was compulsively masturbating. I wasn't doing porn, but I was more, compulsively masturbating. I was chasing women a lot. I pretty much had a mild sex addiction, I would say. I had a mild sex addiction. So for me, it was mainly processing that shame in the lower region, any blockages in that area, if there's any rage, to process that. And a lot of the sexual energy can naturally move up after that when there's no blockage. So that was very helpful for me to work with the sexual urges. Sometimes, yes, I had periods where I was like, fuck, I need sex, or I need to fuck, or I need to wank, or whatever came up. I would basically spend 10 minutes just, going into myself, feeling the sexual energy and enjoying the sexual energy, and letting it come up naturally. I think that's a huge part of it. Like really just enjoying it, I think you told me this, to enjoy, if you're feeling horny, just enjoy the horniness, or ground the horniness out. That was another thing that was huge, like feeling my legs, feeling my feet on the ground. When I was feeling very horny, I've noticed that the urges would drop, because it was just grounding it out, grounding all that energy that was like making me want to do all this other stuff.
So I want to talk about loneliness, because I think you mentioned that, and I notice when I do get those, when I seek hits from women, like usually I'm doing this because like on message or whatever, it's always later at night for me, when I'm like, I feel like I wasn't quite stimulated during the day and I want to flirt before I go to bed. Like, it's kind of like, like some people have a nightcap and maybe that's their way of, experiencing the feminine. Like and I notice that if I don't get it right, if I tell myself not to do it, I do feel like some level of loneliness. It's like maybe 30 minutes of loneliness before I go to sleep. what was your experience with that? And I'm sure many men experience something like that if they actually go on this cleanse.
It's a really good question. Loneliness is a huge one. Yeah, because I did what you used to do. I used to message a lot of girls just to get that hit, flirt, all that stuff. I would listen to music. For me personally, I listen to music at night, like really not crappy pop music. Well, I hate pop music, but really maybe instrumental music. I used to listen to really, really good music at night before I slept, or I would read certain books like poetry, which would get me to feel. I don't know if you've ever heard of Pablo Neruda.
Mm-hmm.
Like his books, he wrote 100 love poems to his wife who died. Just reading his poems would fill me with love.
Mm-hmm.
And that would counteract the loneliness, because loneliness is the feeling of separation, that you're alone,
Yeah.
you have love, you're unlovable, whatever. And then, but when you start reading things like that or stimulating yourself, that makes you feel love, you don't feel that loneliness anymore. You can be in your own presence and feel that wholeness.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think this loneliness and lust, actually, I think lust is often, or loneliness is often mistaken for lust. I've talked about this on the podcast with like porn addiction and stuff. Like a lot of guys jerk off, not because they're actually horny, but because they're feeling separate or lonely or frustrated, and it's a way to medicate. Um, so even for someone just with porn addiction, this could be huge. Actually, the way
Yeah,
probably most guys get their feminine fix is probably porn.
it is. Yeah, that's a huge one. Or, yeah, Facebook or Instagram. The other thing I was going to mention to you, the other thing about that's really good for loneliness was walking in nature. Like if you have the ocean or the forest or a park, just going walking in this nature place is really good for loneliness, because the idea of the cleanse is actually to release that attachment to the small feminine and really build your connection with the greater feminine. And that creates that openness. Because how can you really be, if you think about it, how can you really be lonely? I mean, right now there's like 1 million people outside. There's so much noise, there's trees, there's birds. The truth is you're never lonely, you're never alone. So it's just an idea, yeah, that I need to fulfill something in me, or my inner child needs to be fed. And that's another thing we got to talk about, is the inner child, but that's essentially the truth. But the loneliness itself doesn't really exist. If you look at it, it's not really true. It's just because a part of you needs nourishment in a way. And oh, this was one other thing I used to do if I did feel lonely, because when you start checking into your body, you're going to start noticing parts of you do need touch, will need caressing. So you can caress yourself. I sometimes, in my solar plexus, if I feel this pain or I feel lonely, I soothe myself. I just stroke myself on my chest, and then I'm, reassuring that you're safe, you're here, you're lovable, I love you. So you're giving yourself that love instead of seeking it from the outside.
Yeah,
And
it
you're
sounds
feeling
like almost being your own mother for, in a sense.
exactly, yeah. There's a really good book I've been reading called The Inner Child Workbook. I think it's by Catherine. Oh, I don't know what her name is. Catherine Taylor, I think. And she worked, I think, for 40, 50 years on her inner child. And she was saying you've got to nurture your inner child at different stages of development. So you have the baby, you have the infant, you have the toddler, you have the teenager, and you've got to nourish every part of those stages, because they all have needs, they all have things they need to express. And through the cleanse, you can start working with those parts of you, and that makes you whole, because you're no longer held back in those stages of development.
Yeah, I think, yeah, this could be, almost all of my female friends complain that their men turn them into their mother. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a common thing that you hear from women a lot. And I can see this being, yeah, it's like yeah, I could see how this could be a way to counteract the mother complexes that so many guys have. Like
Yeah,
to really be whole and not need it, like to not have even a stomach for the donuts that she's giving. So like you don't need it anymore. And it's great. She can
yeah,
stay as a lover.
yeah. You become much more present. You become a real man because you're not like that. You love her, but you don't need her. So it's different. You're like, look, I'm here for you, but I don't need you, and that's powerful. That's real love. I mean, saying I love you, but it's because I need you. That's not really love.
Yeah.
That's like some attachment thing. I don't know. And it's funny you mentioned the mother thing. 'Cause my ex had exactly the same thing. Like we were dating at some point, and then I even openly said to her, "You're like my mom. This is not right." And I'm not blaming her because I knew it was with me. And we ended up breaking up, but I needed to take time for myself to figure out what was going on there because I knew I was in that relationship because I needed her security. I need security from her instead of having the security in myself, which is really what it's about. It's about having that security, that love, that you can stand on your own 2 feet, that you can take care of yourself. And then when your bucket is filled and you have love in yourself, you can give love to the feminine. And this is what Robert Glover said to me, which blew my mind. I was like, whoa, I didn't even think about that. He goes, the masculine is there to give love to the feminine, not the other way around. The feminine is the bucket that needs to be filled, and the masculine is already filled up, and he's overflowing with love, and he's giving love to the feminine with his presence. It's not about him trying to get love from her.
Yeah, I wonder about that because yeah, okay. I mean, I could probably see context where maybe that's not true, but I think that's fine as a model. And I think it's actually a more useful model than this idea of taking, which I think is the point of this feminine cleanse stuff.
Yeah, it's giving to give. Yeah, it's giving to give and not giving to get, which I was doing a lot. Is like really trying to give but I wanted something back, sort of
Yeah.
thing.
It's something I discussed. I was actually on the last podcast with a guest. We were talking about celibacy. You know, lately I've been realizing that some part of me likes seemingly doing the opposite, right? Not where I'm becoming a child to my girlfriend, but like I'm becoming her savior. But really, it's also another insecurity coming out because if she depends on me, then of course she's with me. You know, like then I'm always going to have that. You know, it's kind of a way of claiming someone on some level. Still driven by insecurity is the point. And it really be full because I look at like some of the weird relationship decisions I've made. Of course, they're always because I feel some sort of wound, right? So to
Yeah,
really fill yourself, I mean, I guess this goes for everyone, men and women, to be able to be full and enter a relationship as a whole person.
yeah, exactly. That's the thing, because you attract something that's in you. And I'm not going to say this for you, but this was true for me because shortly after I found out about the sexual abuse, I was dating women who had been sexually abused, a few of them. And I'm like, why am I attracting all these women who've been sexually abused? And then I found out, oh, okay, that's why. Because they're always a mirror. They're always showing you something that you need to look at. And it's a useful mirror. You'll be like, oh, okay, there must be something going on in me. Because once you attract someone healthy and whole, then you know that you're at that point. And
Yeah.
not saying you should never have relationships again. I mean, they're just a useful indicator of where you're at. I think they're
Yeah.
really good to see that.
Yeah. Can you say more about like, so what is exactly the great feminine to you?
The ocean now. Right now, it's the ocean because for me, it's just anything that's greater than me. So the other thing that came out of my cleanse is my service to humanity, and I'm doing a lot of work with men now, which came out of the cleanse because I realized like a lot of men are, going through a lot of these challenges, and I have a lot more love for men. I had a lot of insecurity about other men and a lot of fear. Now
Yeah, you
I
shared
have.
You sounds like you're less competitive and like more fatherly almost.
Yeah, I was a little boy before. I'd be insecure. Oh, he's better than me, and he's getting laid more, and or whatever. But now I'm like, he's just a guy like me who's got problems, and I really like to, support them and help them out. And a lot of that energy's come up since the cleanse. I've sort of helped a lot of men go through that, helped them to release a lot of stuff, and I'm really happy when I hear their stories now. Like that didn't happen before. Before I'd be like insecure about it, but now when I see that they're doing really well, I'm like, I'm so happy he's doing good. That's how it should be for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I talked about this recently on the. I just did an episode on the king archetype, and like I think it's a necessary turning point for people. Like you start your journey for your own selfish problems, which is natural. But if once you get to the point where you're whole enough, if you don't switch your problem solving mechanism to other people, you almost always go into hungry ghost behavior. Like if you've gotten laid enough to not feel lonely, but you still seek getting laid, you're only going to go, it's inevitable you're going to go into addictive behavior or separating behavior, as opposed to reconnecting to the collective, which only can come through service.
yes, exactly. Yeah, that's why it's self-destructive. All these behaviors and giving back to humanity. That's another thing. If you're doing a cleanse, you will notice you'll start wanting to give back. You will start doing stuff. It might not be men's coaching. It could be helping animals or helping old elderly or something. I mean, one of my dreams now is to perhaps at some point go to India and help children who are on the street in India, or maybe are being sexually molested in India, because there's thousands of kids. There's some horrible shit going on down there. So at some point next year, I probably will go there, maybe volunteer, but I would like to open a school there to help them out. So that's a strong goal I have that I want to do next year. But before I had none of this, I didn't realize any of this. I was more stuck in my own small needs, my own, all these little wants that I wanted. So
Yeah. I'm curious, how do you feel about your future now? Has anything changed in that respect?
I feel I actually watched one of your podcasts. I got to say, you were an inspiration in a way because you wrote some. You had a podcast about money once. I think it was about money fears,
Mm-hmm.
and you said something which has been growing in me already. You said about faith in the future, faith, and it's like no matter how shit things might seem right now, or if they do get shit, that there's always life will always find you the right path. It's gonna put you on the right path. So I have a business right now, and sometimes at times I stress out about money or I stress out, oh, where's it going? But I always know at some point life is going to take care of me. And so I have faith in the future. I have faith in whatever life gives me. And
Yeah.
Cleanse taught me a huge thing about that.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking about the same thing when you said something about when you said about serving other people. Like it just becomes the natural impulse, and it becomes like a self-fulfilling, it becomes a positive cycle where it feels better to serve, and you feel safer the more you serve, so you don't have to worry anymore. It's like the opposite
No,
of addiction. Cool,
yeah.
man. I'm glad we spoke. I mean, was there anything else? I think you said you want to say something on the inner child. Was there anything else you wanted to
Oh
talk
yeah,
about?
inner child work. Yeah, I was saying, yeah. So for any guys that want to do the cleanse, I would recommend a somatic therapist, someone qualified. I have a lot of knowledge in this area, but I still see a therapist who knows about inner child work. So as you mentioned, Ruwan, you mentioned the mother complex. Like a lot of men treat their girlfriends or wives like mothers. That's because you're probably not developed. Your inner child is still held back in a certain development stage. So a good therapist will help you nurture the child so it can essentially, it transmutes and it grows and you release it. And once you release all those parts of you that weren't given what they needed, you end up becoming more and more whole. So a good somatic therapist can really help you nurture the inner child. And I would say in this work, it's everything. I think that's the key part that will allow you to move from this immature boy to a man. So,
yeah, and I know both you and John Wineland suggest support from other men, like men's groups and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, and you have something coming up for this specifically, right? Feminine cleanse.
Yes. So basically, yeah, this is really important. I was going to say to a lot of guys out there, when you do the cleanse, get a therapist and get men's support. And so you mentioned about the horniness, and if you have the urge to go to porn, instead of doing that, you can reach out to a friend, reach out to a friend you trust, who you feel safe with. And if you're feeling a lot of grief come up, it's good to have a group of men you can be vulnerable with and share that emotion with. Because number one, you're building your connection to your own masculine by doing that. And number two, you're being vulnerable. You're allowing yourself to release in front of people, which allows you to release shame. So I don't like releasing my emotions in front of people, especially men. But for example, the other day I was having a lot of grief come up. So I called my buddy Vincent, who I trust, and he's really skilled. And I let my grief come out in front of him. And I just cried for 10, 15 minutes. So having a good solid group of friends, of guy friends, or even if you have one or two guy friends who are at your emotional level or higher, is really, really important when you're doing the cleanse, because they're gonna bring you up. Because that's what you want to do. You want to go to a higher conscious level. If you're hanging out with PUA friends, no good, because they're gonna drag you back down. They're gonna bring you back to old patterns. So I would say, in effect, just ditch these guys or have a break from them for a month, 1 or 2 months. So other guys chasing women doing validation, because they're not gonna like you doing the cleanse. Because when I started doing my cleanse and I told certain people, they were like, "Why are you doing that? You're crazy!" Like they were fighting me against it because they didn't like the idea of it themselves. So tell people you feel safe with, that you know are gonna support you, and have a good accountability group. And me and Vincent for Get Real Brother, we're gonna create like a mastermind group for the cleanse. It's gonna be, I think, 10 guys max, and we're gonna do weekly calls where we can discuss all your challenges, your slip ups, give you tools how to manage the cleanse. And if you've got any questions or you need to just share, it's a good space to do it. So we'll hold like a very, very safe space for you guys.
Cool. And it starts in September, is that right?
So it starts beginning of September. We're offering 2 programs. One's a self-study course with videos where you can get tips and advice on the cleanse and different tools. And then alongside that, you can sign up for a mastermind where you can get the support live with me and Vincent, and we'll guide you through it. And that will go on for, you can either do it for a month or you can do it for 90 days, depending on how long you want to do it.
Cool. Well, we'll have links to that in the show notes. Cool, man. Well, it was great to catch up and hear about your perspective on this. You're going to be in Portugal the rest of the year?
Well, I live here now. I signed the 1-year contract. So yeah,
sure.
yeah, this is where I want to be. I might come to Asia. I might see you there in Asia, maybe end of the year. And then we'll see where it goes after that. I was actually thinking about going to Sri Lanka, maybe in November, but let's see with COVID what's going on with that.
Yeah, if travel is possible, I want to be in your part of the world in March, hopefully Spain or something like that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm letting go of expectations this time.
Have faith in whatever happens. It'll be the best. All right, man.
Cool, man.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, likewise. This is great.